This story is titled, My Fiancé Threatened to Call Off Our Wedding If I Didn't Meet Her Demands, so I ended things right there. Alright, so let me set the stage for you. I'm just a regular guy from a tiny town in Montana. Picture this: one main road, a diner that doubles as the gossip hub, and a Walmart that everyone treats like the mall. That's where I grew up, and honestly, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Life was slow and simple, and that's how I liked it. My family wasn't rich, but we weren't struggling either. My dad ran an auto repair shop, and my mom worked part-time at the local diner while keeping us kids in line. They were old school, salt-of-the-earth kind of people. My dad used to say, "You don't spend money you don't have, and you don't borrow unless you're out of option." Mom was the same. If we couldn't afford something, we didn't need it. No whining, no shortcuts, just hard work and patience. Growing up, I learned how to save early. My first job was mowing lawns for neighbors in the summer, and instead of blowing the money on video games like my friends, I'd stash most of it away. By the time I graduated high school, I had a couple thousand saved up, which felt like a fortune at 18. College wasn't a big flashy deal for me either. I went to a state school nearby, working part-time at a hardware store to cover my expenses. My degree was in information technology, nothing glamorous, but it got me a steady job as a network technician after graduation. It wasn't the kind of job that makes people go, wow, but it paid well, and I didn't dread going to work. By the time I hit 31, I was living the life I thought I wanted. I had a little apartment, a 10-year-old pickup that still ran great, and a decent savings account. I wasn't into flashy stuff. I bought my clothes on sale, cooked most of my meals at home, and didn't care about keeping up with trends. Life was simple, and I was content. Now, I'll admit, my dating life was nothing to write home about. I'd had a few girlfriends over the years, but nothing serious. Most of them wanted to move to the city or live a lifestyle I couldn't and didn't want to afford. That was fine by me. I figured the right person would come along eventually, someone who liked the same simple life I did. And then came Tina. I met Tina at a friend's house. My buddy Jake had just moved into a new house, and he threw a little get-together to celebrate. I wasn't planning to meet anyone that day. I showed up in a flannel shirt and jeans, carrying a six-pack of soda, just looking to hang out with my friends. Tina walked in like she owned the place. She was wearing this flowy dress and sunglasses that looked like they cost more than my truck. She had this air about her, like she was used to being noticed. I remember thinking, she's way out of my league, but somehow we ended up talking. Turns out she was Jake's girlfriend's coworker, visiting from the city. I don't even remember how the conversation started, but I do remember being surprised at how easy it was to talk to her. She wasn't as intimidating as she looked. She laughed at my jokes and said she liked how laid back I was. Over the next few weeks, we kept in touch. Tina seemed different from the other women I dated. She told me she was tired of the city and loved how real everything felt in my town. She said she admired how I didn't try to impress anyone and how I seemed to know exactly what I wanted out of life. For a while, I believed her. Tina started visiting more often. She loved the quiet mornings when we'd sit on my porch drinking coffee, and she didn't seem to mind that I lived in a small, no-frills apartment. She even came fishing with me a couple of times, though she wasn't great at it. She laughed at herself when she tangled the line or dropped the bait, and I thought, this is it. She gets me. We dated for 2 years, and during that time, I thought everything was perfect. Sure, Tina had her moments. She'd occasionally complain about how boring the town was, or how she missed her favorite sushi place in the city, but she always followed it up with something like, "But it's worth it to be with you." To be honest, I should have seen the cracks forming. For example, Tina would always joke about how she couldn't wait for me to get a better truck. She'd laugh and say, "Imagine us pulling up to a fancy restaurant in this thing." At the time, I thought it was just her sense of humor. Now, I wonder if it was a hint of what was coming. Then, there was the way she'd talk about her life before we met. She'd drop casual comments about the designer clothes her parents used to buy her, or the fancy vacations she took as a kid. I didn't think much of it. I figured that was just her upbringing, and it didn't mean she was materialistic. But for every moment Tina spent being supportive and down to earth, there were little moments that made me pause. Like when she insisted we go to the nicest restaurant in town for our 1-year anniversary, even though she knew I was saving for a down payment on a house. Or when she rolled her eyes at the off-brand watch I bought her for her birthday, even though she said she loved it. Still, I ignored the red flags. I thought we balanced each other out, me being practical and her being more adventurous. I figured that's what relationships were about, meeting in the middle. So, when I decided to propose, I wanted it to reflect us, or at least what I thought us was. I spent weeks searching for the perfect ring. Instead of going to some big box jewelry store, I went to a small jeweler in town who made custom pieces. I picked out a beautiful gold band with a small, vibrant sapphire in the center. It wasn't massive, but it was unique and meaningful. I thought it captured Tina perfectly. Classy, but understated. The proposal itself was simple, just like I knew Tina would want. I took her out to the lake where we'd gone fishing on one of our first dates. It was a quiet, sunny afternoon, and we were sitting on the dock, feet dangling over the water. I pulled out the ring, said a few heartfelt words, and asked her to marry me. I really thought I'd nailed it. Everything about the moment felt perfect. Simple, heartfelt, and meaningful. She'd always said she loved that about me, how I didn't need to make a big show of things. So, when she teared up and said yes, hugging me like she never wanted to let go, I felt like the luckiest guy alive. At first, she seemed over the moon about the ring. She kept holding up her hand, twisting it in the light, and saying how much she loved it. "It's perfect," she said again and again. "No one else has anything like this. You really get me." The first week after the proposal was like living in a dream. Tina was telling all her friends about how thoughtful I was, and how much the ring meant to her. I'd catch her snapping pictures of it on her hand, sharing them with her best friends, and smiling like a kid who just got their favorite toy. She'd hug me out of nowhere and say things like, "You're amazing, you know that?" It made me feel like I'd done everything right. But then, slowly, little things started to make me wonder. For one, she was showing the ring to everyone. Her co-workers, her girlfriends, even her yoga instructor, but not to her family. It came up when we visited her parents for dinner about 2 weeks after the proposal. I'd assumed she'd be just as excited to show them as she was with everyone else, but she didn't even bring it up. When her mom asked, "So, let's see the ring," Tina hesitated, her hand instinctively going to her lap. "Oh, it's not really, she started, before finally holding it up with a forced smile. Her mom examined it, tilting her head. It's nice. Very different." "Yeah," Tina said quickly, slipping her hand back down. "It's unique, you know? Not your typical diamond." Her dad didn't even look up from his steak, but her mom gave me a tight smile and said, "Well, if you two are happy, that's all that matters." Tina didn't say much after that, and the ride home was quiet. I asked her if everything was okay, and she shrugged it off. "Yeah, it's just my mom. She's always weird about stuff like that." I didn't push it, but it nagged at me. Why did it feel like she was embarrassed? Then there was the local community center I suggested for the wedding. It's a beautiful space that's affordable and has a lot of character. I thought it would be perfect for us. Big enough to fit all our family and friends, but not so massive that it'd feel over the top. Plus, it had these gorgeous wooden beams and big windows that let in tons of natural light. I brought Tina to see it one Saturday, thinking she'd love it. She walked around politely, nodding at all the details I pointed out, but her excitement wasn't there. "What do you think?" I asked, trying to gauge her reaction. "It's nice," she said after a pause, but there was a hint of hesitation in her voice she couldn't hide. "Just nice?" I pressed, laughing a little to lighten the mood. She shrugged. "I mean, yeah, it's fine. It's just, I don't know. It's not what I imagined, you know? But if it's what works, then that's fine." I felt a pang of disappointment. I'd been so sure this place would be a perfect fit for us, but her lukewarm response made me second-guess myself. Still, I told myself it was just a matter of adjusting expectations. Maybe she'd warm up to the idea once we started planning more details. After all, Tina kept telling me she loved how I kept things grounded and practical. That was part of what brought us together, or so I thought. There were other moments like that, little cracks in the perfect image she'd presented. One evening, when we were hanging out with her friends, one of them asked to see the ring. Tina held out her hand, and her friend gushed about how unique it was. "Oh my gosh, it's so you," her friend said. Tina smiled, but it was more subdued than usual. "Yeah, he really put a lot of thought into it," she said. Her tone was off, like she was trying to sound enthusiastic, but wasn't quite pulling it off. It felt like she was playing along for my benefit, and it left me with this gnawing feeling in the back of my mind. Still, I brushed it off. I figured maybe I was overthinking things. Wedding planning is stressful, right? Maybe she just had a lot on her plate. But as time went on, those little moments added up. Tina would rave about the ring and the proposal to some people, but downplay it with others, like she was trying to manage expectations depending on who she was talking to. I remember overhearing her on the phone with her sister one night. I wasn't eavesdropping, but I couldn't help catching snippets of the conversation. "Yeah, it's different," she said, her voice low. "Not what I expected, but no, I mean, it's fine. He really tried, and that's what matters, right?" That stung. I'd thought she genuinely loved the ring and everything it represented, but hearing her talk about it like that made me wonder if she was just putting on a show for me. At the time, I didn't know what to make of it. I wanted to believe she was just dealing with pressure from her family or friends, but part of me couldn't shake the feeling that Tina wasn't being entirely honest about how she felt. The thing is, she never outright complained. She didn't demand a different ring or insist we book some extravagant venue, but there was a subtle, unspoken disappointment that I couldn't ignore. It was in the way she hesitated when someone asked about the ring, the way she looked around the community center, like she was forcing herself to see potential, the way she always seemed to deflect when I asked her what she wanted. At the time, I chalked it up to nerves or stress. After all, planning a wedding is a big deal, and Tina had always seemed so supportive of my practical approach to life. I figured we'd work through it together, but now I wonder if those little moments were warning signs of what was to come. If Tina's true feelings were starting to peek through, even if she wasn't ready to say them out loud. And then, little by little, things started to shift. It began with the guest list. I'd assumed we'd keep it small. Just close family and friends, maybe 50 people tops. Tina and I both come from pretty big families, but I thought we could find a way to pare it down. When I brought it up, Tina seemed on board. "Yeah, that sounds good," she said. "We don't need a massive crowd. It's about us, not anyone else." Great, I thought. We're on the same page. But a week later, she handed me a rough draft of the guest list, and my jaw nearly hit the floor. It had over 200 names on it. "What is this?" I asked, holding up the list. "It's just a starting point," Tina said, smiling like she hadn't just doubled our head count. "Tina, this is 4 times the number we talked about." She shrugged. "I couldn't leave anyone out. I mean, my parents have a lot of friends, and they'd be offended if we didn't invite them. And then there's my co-workers, plus some of my college friends." I frowned. "Do you even talk to half these people?" "Not all the time," she admitted. "But it would be rude not to invite them. Plus, the more people we invite, the more gifts we get, right?" She laughed like it was a joke, but I wasn't so sure. "Gifts aren't the point, Tina," I said. "We can't afford a wedding for 200 people. We'll figure it out," she said breezily. "It's not like everyone will show up anyway." I let it go for the moment, thinking we'd revisit the list and trim it down later. But deep down, I started to feel like I was losing control of the wedding plans. Then there was the venue. After the lukewarm reaction to the community center, Tina began showing me pictures of other places, ones that looked like they belonged in a movie, not a small-town wedding. One was a vineyard with sprawling gardens and chandeliers in the ballroom. Another was a fancy hotel downtown with a rooftop terrace and city views. "These are just ideas," Tina said, scrolling through the pictures on her phone. "They're beautiful," I admitted, "but they're way out of our budget." She sighed. "I know, but don't you think it would be amazing to get married somewhere like this? It's our wedding. It should feel special." "It will feel special," I said. "It's not about the venue. It's about us." Tina gave me a tight smile. "I know. I just want it to be memorable, that's all." I could tell she wasn't happy, but she didn't push it further that night. Still, the seed had been planted. As the weeks went on, her expectations kept creeping up. First, it was the guest list and the venue. Then it was the food. "What about a buffet?" I suggested one evening while we were going over catering options. "It's affordable and people can pick what they like." "Buffets are so casual," Tina said, wrinkling her nose. "Don't you think a plated dinner would be nicer?" "Sure, if we could afford it," I said. "But a sit-down dinner for 200 people would cost a fortune." "We don't have to go overboard," she said. "Just a couple of courses, maybe steak or salmon." "Tina, do you know how much that would cost?" "We'll figure it out," she said again, her favorite phrase lately. It was the same with the entertainment. I suggested hiring a DJ, someone local who could play a mix of our favorite songs. Tina wanted a live band. "DJs are fine for a birthday party," she said. "But this is a wedding. A live band would make it so much more elegant." "Do you know how expensive live bands are?" She sighed. "It's just an idea. I'm not saying we have to do it, but wouldn't it be nice?" Every conversation felt like this. Her suggesting something extravagant and me reminding her we couldn't afford it. She always said she understood, but I could tell she was disappointed. It wasn't anything she said outright, but it was in the way her smile would falter or how she'd change the subject. The turning point came when Tina casually brought up the idea of hiring a wedding planner. "I think it would help take some of the stress off us," she said one night while we were having dinner. "Tina, wedding planners are expensive," I said. "But they save you money in the long run," she argued. "They know how to negotiate with vendors and stuff." "I think we can handle it ourselves," I said. "It's not like we're planning a royal wedding." Tina gave me a look I couldn't quite read. "I just don't want to feel overwhelmed," she said quietly. I felt a twinge of guilt. Maybe I was being too rigid. Tina had a demanding job, and I knew she wanted the wedding to be special. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that her idea of special was getting further and further from what we'd originally talked about. The final straw, at least for this chapter, came when I caught her scrolling through pictures of engagement rings on her phone. "Looking for ideas for someone else?" I teased, peeking over her shoulder. She quickly locked the screen and gave me a nervous laugh. "No, just browsing." "For what?" I asked, confused. "Nothing. she said quickly. I didn't press her, but it stuck with me. Later that night, when she went to the bathroom, I couldn't resist sneaking a peek at her phone. The search history was full of diamond engagement rings and how to upgrade your engagement ring. I'd spent months saving for her ring, thinking it was exactly what she wanted. She'd told me how much she loved it, how thoughtful and unique it was. And now she was secretly looking for something bigger and flashier? I didn't say anything right away. I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt, but it was hard to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. This was the moment I started to realize that the Tina I thought I knew, the one who loved my small-town values and didn't care about material things, might not have been entirely real. As time went on, Tina's true colors became harder and harder to ignore, starting with the bridal party. At first, Tina told me she wanted her bridesmaids to pick their own dresses within a certain color scheme. I thought that was thoughtful and practical. She'd always said she didn't want to burden her friends financially, but apparently that plan didn't last long. One night, she came home with a handful of bridal magazines and a Pinterest board full of ideas. "Look at these," she said, excitedly shoving the magazines in my face. I flipped through the pages, noticing the designer labels on every dress. "These are nice," I said hesitantly. "But they look expensive?" "Well, yeah," Tina said, as if it were obvious. "They're Vera Wang. You can't go wrong with a classic designer dress." For you or the bridesmaids?" I asked, already sensing where this was headed. "For the bridesmaids," she said casually, like it was no big deal. "Tina, those dresses are going to cost hundreds of dollars each," I said. "Are you sure your friends can afford that?" She shrugged. "They'll figure it out. It's one day, and it's important to me that everything looks cohesive. Plus, they'll have a beautiful dress they can wear again." "Tina, most people don't wear bridesmaid dresses again. It's not exactly practical." She rolled her eyes. "Why do you always have to be so negative? It's my wedding, and this is what I want. They'll understand." I didn't argue further, but the whole thing left a bad taste in my mouth. It wasn't just about the money. It was the way she seemed to expect her friends to bend over backward for her, no matter what. The next blow came with the bachelorette party. I thought she'd do something simple, like a night out with her friends, or a weekend at a cabin. But Tina had other ideas. "We're going to Miami," she announced one evening, grinning from ear to ear. "Miami?" I repeated, stunned. "Yeah, a long weekend on the beach with my girls. It'll be so much fun." "That sounds expensive," I said carefully. "Well, yeah," she said with a laugh. "But it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. They'll understand." "Did you talk to your friends about it?" "Not yet," she admitted. "But I already booked the villa. They'll figure it out." "Tina, what if some of them can't afford it?" "Then they're not real friends," she said flatly. "If they cared about me, they'd make it work." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't the Tina I thought I knew, the one who said she loved my simple, practical approach to life. It was like she'd transformed into a completely different person, someone who cared more about appearances and extravagance than the people around her. But the worst was yet to come. One evening, Tina sat me down and told me she'd been talking to her parents about the wedding budget. I braced myself, knowing this conversation wasn't going to go well. "So," she began, "my parents think we should really consider taking out a loan to make sure we have the wedding we deserve." I blinked, trying to process what she'd just said. "A loan? For the wedding?" "Yeah," she said, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "It's not like we can't pay it off later. It's just to make sure everything is perfect. Tina, we've talked about this. I don't want to start our marriage in debt." "It's not that big of a deal," she said, waving me off. "Everyone does it." "No, they don't," I said firmly. "And even if they did, I'm not doing it. I've worked hard to stay out of debt, and I'm not about to ruin that for one day." Tina's expression hardened. "You're being so selfish," she snapped. "This is supposed to be the happiest day of our lives, and you're acting like it's a chore." "I'm not being selfish," I said, trying to stay calm. "I'm being practical. We don't need to spend a fortune to have a beautiful wedding." She crossed her arms and glared at me. "Maybe you don't care about having a beautiful wedding, but I do. And if you loved me, you'd understand that." That hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't believe she was pulling the "if you loved me" card over something as ridiculous as taking out a loan for a wedding. "Tina, this isn't about love. It's about being responsible. I'm not going into debt for this. And that's final." She didn't say anything, just stood up and stormed out of the room. For the next few days, we barely spoke. Tina was clearly furious with me, but I wasn't backing down. I'd made my stance clear, and I wasn't going to let her guilt me into changing my mind. Then, as if to twist the knife further, she started involving my family. One night at dinner, my sister Becca pulled me aside. "Hey," she said, "I was talking to Tina, and she mentioned you've been, a little stubborn about the wedding plans." "Stubborn?" I repeated, annoyed. "She just wants to make it special," Becca said. You know how much this means to her. Don't you think you could loosen up a little? Loosen up? I said, my voice rising. She wants me to take out a loan, Becca. A loan? For a wedding, Becca frowned. Well, yeah, but it's not like you can't pay it off later. That's not the point, I said, feeling my frustration boil over. I'm not going into debt for one day, no matter how special it is. If Tina can't understand that, then maybe we have bigger problems. Becca didn't have much to say after that, but I could tell she didn't agree with me. Tina had clearly done a good job of spinning the situation to make me look like the bad guy. At this point, I was starting to feel like I didn't even recognize the woman I'd proposed to. The kind, supportive, down-to-earth Tina I thought I knew had been replaced by someone who cared more about appearances and status than the life we were supposed to be building together. The wedding was no longer about us. It was about her and what she wanted. And the more I tried to stand my ground, the more she seemed to resent me for it. I wasn't sure how much more of this I could take. At this point, things were already on thin ice between me and Tina, but what happened next completely shattered whatever was left. The tension from all her demands and our fights had been building, but I still thought we might be able to work through it. I was wrong. It started with Tina asking me to come over to her parents' house for dinner. This wasn't unusual. We'd had dinner with her parents before. But this time, something felt off. She was overly sweet about inviting me, saying things like, "It's just a casual dinner. My parents want to talk about the wedding plans. Nothing serious." I should have trusted my gut because when I walked into their house that night, I could tell immediately that something was up. Her mom and dad were sitting in the living room with these overly polite smiles plastered on their faces. Tina's dad, a guy who rarely said 2 words to me before, suddenly acted like he was all buddy-buddy. "Ah, there he is," he said, clapping me on the back. "The man of the hour." I gave a small smile, not sure where this was going. Tina grabbed my arm and led me to the couch, sitting closer than usual. That was my second clue. Something was off. Tina usually wasn't big on PDA around her parents. Her mom brought out drinks, and we made small talk for a while. It was awkward, but I chalked it up to wedding stress. After about 20 minutes, Tina's dad cleared his throat and leaned forward. "So," he started, "Tina's told us about some of the financial disagreements you two have been having." I glanced at Tina, confused. She gave me this tight-lipped smile, like she was trying to encourage me to play along. Yeah, we've been talking about the budget," I said. "I think we just have different ideas about how much we want to spend." Her dad chuckled, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. It was the kind of laugh people use when they're about to say something they think is clever, but is really just condescending. "Well, son, a wedding isn't just a party. It's an investment. It's a reflection of your commitment to each other." "Right," I said slowly. "But I don't think starting a marriage in debt is the best way to reflect that commitment." Her mom chimed in, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Oh, but isn't it worth it to make Tina happy? She's always dreamed of a beautiful wedding. Don't you want to give her that?" I could feel my blood starting to boil. "Of course, I want her to be happy," I said. "But I also think we can have a beautiful wedding without spending money we don't have." Tina's dad leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "So, what I'm hearing is, you're not willing to step up for my daughter." That hit me, but I stayed calm. "No, what I'm saying is that I'm not willing to jeopardize our future for one day." Tina and I talked about having a simple, meaningful wedding, and that's what I thought we both wanted. Tina finally spoke up, her voice soft and almost pleading. "Babe, it's not about jeopardizing our future. It's about making memories, starting our life together in a way we can look back on and feel proud of." I turned to her, trying to keep my voice steady. "Tina, I want those things too, but I don't think we need to spend a fortune to have them. We can make memories without going into debt." Her mom sighed dramatically. "Oh, honey, sometimes men just don't understand. You're trying to create something magical, and that's hard for them to grasp." That was it. I'd had enough. I stood up, feeling the weight of their judgmental stares. "With all due respect," I said, looking at her parents, "this isn't about me not understanding. It's about priorities. I've worked hard to build a stable life, and I'm not going to throw that away for something we don't need. If that's not good enough for Tina, or for you, then maybe we need to reevaluate what this wedding is really about." Tina's dad stood up too, clearly trying to intimidate me. "Reevaluate? What are you saying, boy?" "I'm saying," I replied, my voice firm, "that I'm not going to be bullied into doing something I don't believe in. I love Tina, but I won't sacrifice my principles or my financial stability for anyone." The room went silent. Tina's mom looked like she'd just seen a ghost, and her dad's face turned bright red. Tina, on the other hand, looked absolutely stunned. "You're overreacting," she finally said, her voice shaky. "No, Tina, I'm not," I said, turning to face her. This has been building for weeks. You've been pushing for things you know I can't afford, and I've tried to compromise, but it's never enough. I can't do this anymore." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't back down. If having your dream wedding is more important than building a life together, then maybe we're not right for each other. "Tina, say something," her mom hissed. But Tina just stared at me, speechless. I grabbed my coat and turned to leave. "I think it's best if we take some time to think about what we really want," I said. "I'll let you know when I'm ready to talk." The next day, I packed up the few things Tina had left at my apartment and texted her to come pick them up. She didn't reply right away, but later that evening, she sent me a long message saying how hurt she was and how she couldn't believe I was giving up on us. I didn't respond. I knew there was no point. This wasn't about giving up. It was about refusing to be manipulated into something I didn't believe in. Standing my ground wasn't easy, but it was the right thing to do. I might have lost Tina, but I kept my dignity and my future. And honestly, that was worth a whole lot more than any wedding. Over the next few weeks, Tina's true nature became even more apparent. Through mutual friends, I learned she was telling people I was cheap and selfish for not agreeing to her wedding plans. Some of her friends reached out to me asking if it was true that I refused to pay for basic wedding expenses. I set the record straight with anyone who asked, but I didn't go out of my way to defend myself. People who really knew me wouldn't believe her nonsense anyway. What really blew my mind, though, was when I found out Tina was already dating someone new, a guy named Eric, who apparently worked as a lawyer and had a reputation for throwing money around. According to one of my buddies, Tina had been bragging about how Eric was willing to give her the life she deserved. And then, karma came knocking. About 2 months after our breakup, I ran into one of Tina's bridesmaids, her best friend Lily, at the grocery store. Lily and I had always gotten along, so I wasn't surprised when she stopped to chat. What did surprise me, though, was how quickly she brought up Tina. "Have you heard about her and Eric?" Lily asked, a knowing smirk on her face. "No," I said cautiously. "What about them?" Lily grinned. "Well, let's just say her dream wedding didn't exactly pan out." Apparently, Tina had been pushing Eric just as hard, if not harder, than she'd pushed me. She'd talked him into booking a massive venue, hiring a high-end wedding planner, and even buying her a new engagement ring. A diamond, of course. But when she started demanding an even bigger budget and throwing fits over minor details, Eric had had enough. "He called off the wedding," Lily said, clearly trying not to laugh. "And get this, he didn't just end the engagement. He dumped her entirely." I couldn't help but feel a little vindicated. I'd tried to tell Tina that her priorities were out of whack, but she wouldn't listen. Now she was facing the consequences of her action. Lily leaned in closer, like she was sharing a juicy secret. "She's been telling everyone he was a jerk, and that he led her on. But between you and me, she did this to herself." I thanked Lily for the update and went on with my shopping, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Over the next few months, I threw myself into improving my life. I eventually bought a cozy little cabin just outside of town. It was exactly the kind of place I'd always dreamed of. Quiet, peaceful, and mine. Every now and then, I'd hear snippets about Tina through mutual friends. Apparently, she was struggling to find someone willing to meet her sky-high expectations. She'd gone on a few dates, but nothing ever lasted. One of my buddies joked that she'd probably end up marrying her credit card if it had a high enough limit. Looking back, I'm grateful for everything that happened with Tina. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I felt like giving in just to keep the peace. But standing my ground taught me an important lesson. Love isn't about bending over backward to meet someone else's unrealistic demands. It's about mutual respect, compromise, and building a life together. Tina may have thought she could bully and guilt me into giving her what she wanted, but in the end, she only showed me who she really was. And honestly, I'm thankful for that. Sometimes, you have to go through the tough stuff to find out what really matters. For me, that meant walking away from Tina and choosing to put my own happiness and values first. And while it hurt at the time, it's a decision I'll never regret. Karma has a funny way of working things out, and seeing Tina's life unravel while mine got better was all the closure I needed.